You're listening to Glove Up or Shut Up on the Angry Marks Podcast Network.
And welcome everybody to another episode of Glove Up or Shut Up right here on AngryMarks.com. My name is Peter H. I'm joined once again by my co-host from Omaha, Nebraska, Stevie J.
And we're joined by one of our favorite recurring guests right here on Glove Up or Shut Up. He is a writer for LA Times, The Sure Dog, The Torch, so many places I can't probably name them all. The one and only Todd Martin is here.
Hey, it's good to be here.
Yes, and we're glad to have you back, and we've got a very busy amount of things to talk about. It's been no shortage of news in the last 7 days or so.
Yeah, the money fight, the big fight.
And one money fight that got flushed down the drain thanks to a positive drug test.
Yeah, that was not as good. What can you say?
No, but let's start with the bigger money fight that went down on Saturday night, and I'm not talking about the one in Mexico City between Sexy Star and Rosemary. I'm talking about the one that happened in Las Vegas between Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather. So, first, your thoughts on the fight itself, Todd.
I thought the fight delivered. I mean, granted, I didn't go in with particularly high expectations. I mean, I think like most people, I was expecting that it was likely going to be not that entertaining of a fight given Floyd Mayweather's propensity for not particularly entertaining fights. But I thought that Conor made a good showing for himself. I thought he won a number of the early rounds. I thought that Mayweather, I mean, people have said like, well, Mayweather, played defensively and waited for Conor to get tired. And that's true. But if Conor wasn't able to present threats offensively and with his reflexes, Mayweather wouldn't have felt the need to sort of wait him out. The fact that he did wait him out, I think, was a reflection of the danger that he saw in McGregor. And McGregor was able to dictate things in the early going. And then to Mayweather's credit, as the fight progressed and he saw that Conor did get tired, he showed a killer instinct, and he really pounced on McGregor in a way that he doesn't always pounce on opponents when he has them in trouble in the past. So I thought it made for an entertaining fight. I thought both guys acquitted themselves well. I thought that the overall event was pretty close to best case scenario.
Well, that was actually going to be my next question. I've heard a lot of people make the argument that everybody got what they wanted here. Conor got to go more than a few rounds with Floyd and show that he was not a chump, and that Floyd got to get a signature 50th win and possibly retire on a high note, and that everybody that sold the pay-per-view got to make millions and millions of dollars. So theoretically, there are no losers in that scenario.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that there were any losers. I think Conor came out better than he went in. I think that, which I wasn't expecting going in. I think he came out a bigger star. I think people left respecting him as well. I mean, you can always hope for more. I mean, certainly Conor, the best case scenario for Conor McGregor, in spite of what I said earlier, would be knocking out Floyd Mayweather. And, likewise, I'm sure Floyd Mayweather would have enjoyed sort of, skunking him and not letting him put up a showing. But, given the sort of realistic gamut of what could happen, I thought it was a good night for pretty much all involved.
Do you think that even though many people have argued that Conor was winning those first 3 rounds, except I guess the judges themselves, they're the only ones who didn't see it that way, but most of the sports writers I read saw it that way. So do you feel it was realistic that if it was, say, a 4-round fight that Conor would have won?
Realistic from what standpoint? Because, I mean, clearly the judges weren't going to give him the fight. So, I mean, it's hard to say it would be realistic that he would won when the judges weren't giving him the rounds even when he was winning them. I mean, I think there was sort of an expectation going in that from the judges that, the fight was going to go a certain way. And when you've sort of got that in your head that this is what the fight is, that one guy is so much better than the other guy, it's, it can be hard to process when the fight is not, in fact, presenting what you were expecting it to.
So you think then that the judges had a preconceived notion and they were not going to change their minds no matter how well Conor was doing?
Well, I mean, they gave him 1 round, so, and one of the judges gave him the second and the third. So, I mean, it's possible, but, I mean, if it were different fighters in there, I don't think that those first 3 rounds were terribly difficult to score.
No. Now, as for the stoppage in the 10th round, correct call? Could it have gone longer? Should it have been stopped even before that? What are your thoughts?
I thought the stoppage was fine. It's sort of funny how I've seen so many mixed opinions on it. Like I've seen people who are just sort of emphatic that it was an early stoppage, and I've heard other people emphatic that it was a just stoppage. I don't know. I'm in the camp that I don't know. I had no problem with it whatsoever. I thought that Conor was clearly very tired. Floyd was landing him some really big shots. Conor wasn't firing back. He had sort of retreated across the ring. It's true that he hadn't gone down, but I mean that's not a requisite to the referee stopping the fight. And I thought that there was a perfectly sound decision by the referee.
All right, Peter, you haven't had a chance to weigh in yet, so do you agree with Todd here that it was the right call to stop it when the fight did?
Absolutely. It was, Conor was definitely running out of gas, and I think some of the fans were hoping that one guy would, get knocked out or at least knocked down at some point in the fight. But, I mean, I was, watching the fight and putting out some tweets after every round, saying this is my scorecard for 3 after 6. After set, I was like, the later the fight went, the more Conor gassed out, really. If he was going to win this fight, he was going to win the early rounds when when Floyd was basically just letting him gas himself out, basically studying the movements and just analyzing Conor's strategy, and then in the later rounds just picked him apart.
All right, Peter, let's continue with you for a second since you're on the spot right now. Do you think that Conor's boxing skill was better than expected based on his early performance when Floyd was, as you said, just letting him tire himself out?
I mean, you really can't say Conor needed like a full fight camp, and that's not the case. I mean, he's an 0-0 boxer. I mean, this was, in actuality, like, this was an exhibition. It wasn't like he's an MMA fighter, not a boxer, so it's hard to equate his boxing talent on an exhibition against, one of the greatest boxers of all time. It would be interesting to see if another MMA fighter in the future does something like this, like attempts to fight another boxer on a big stage like this. But as far as his boxing ability goes, I mean, give him some props for at least trying to do a strategy that was expect the unexpected type. It wasn't exactly like someone was saying, until he throws a kick or a take. I'm like, no, it's a boxing. He's not going to do any of that stuff. But I think he surprised Conor. He surprised Mayweather in the early rounds. But by round 4, you could tell that Money Mayweather he had enough and he wanted to start winning this fight on round 4, 5, and 6.
Well, Peter, you may not have intended to spark the question I'm about to ask Todd, but something you said just drew the comparison into my mind. You said it was really almost an exhibition for Conor, given that he had no pro experience as a boxer, and yet we saw something similar not too long ago in UFC where CM Punk came in with no pro experience as a fighter and didn't do nearly as well coming into MMA as Conor McGregor did into boxing. So, Todd, what do you think this says about Conor McGregor as an overall athlete, that he actually did so well in a completely different sport than his own?
Well, I wouldn't call it a completely different sport. I would call it a pretty similar sport. Honestly, I mean, a lot of the comparisons going into the fight, people would compare it to different sorts of sports. And like, to me, a lot of the comparisons that I heard weren't particularly good comparisons as far as like what the different basics of it are. I mean, Conor McGregor has been striking for over a decade now, and it's true that the rules and the logistics and the tools that you have, the angles, the footwork, all of it are different for MMA versus boxing. But I mean, he makes a living with his hands. I mean, that's how he's won most of his fights, is knocking out people with his fists. So I don't think that it was unrealistic to expect that to translate to some degree Now, the question is obviously how much it would translate. But I mean, we've seen in the past with, MMA fighters going into taking kickboxing bouts, and, sometimes they fare not so well, and sometimes they fare pretty well. I don't view there being a that much of a comparison point compared to CM Punk, because what CM Punk was doing just doesn't translate very much at all to MMA. I mean, being a pro wrestler, while you need athleticism and you need to, sort of train and work your body, just like, in vastly different sports, the fundamentals of what you're doing, trying to inflict pain through punches and kicks, or trying to, impose control on the ground, is very different from the ballet of sorts that is, a cooperative performance art that is pro wrestling.
I think those are all valid points, and it does raise another question in my mind that you did note that he's been making his living with his hands in MMA, but he also makes his living with his kicks as well, with his ability to get takedowns if he needs to. He's got different things in his arsenal besides just his hands. So does this give any credence to the argument that if it was an MMA fight, Conor would have won?
Are you talking about what we saw in the fight, or the argument you just made? In terms of why he would be more likely to win?
I think a little of both, actually.
Okay, so as far as watching the fight, I don't know that watching the fight made me think any more or less about how the fight would go in MMA, because we saw that Conor was more effective in a straight boxing match than I think most people expected, but I don't expect that an MMA fight between the two would likely involve a ton of straight up boxing. So I don't know that it would translate that much, or learn that we would learn that much from what happened. As far as your point about the different tools that are involved in it, I mean, certainly that's going to be key to how an MMA fight would go between the two. And I don't view it as a certainty that McGregor would win an MMA fight between the two, because he is more of a striker than a ground specialist. Now, I still think he'd take down Floyd and he'd win the fight that way, but in an MMA bout where you've got a striker who isn't that good on the ground, the people that I think you really need to worry about are people that their whole game is just being a ground specialist, because they're used to closing distance, trying to avoid getting hit, and then once the fight hits the mat, it's curtains. I mean, I think Floyd Mayweather against a Damian Maia type, I mean, they're obviously very different in weight class, but that sort of type I think is the fight where I'd feel super confident, whereas Conor is more similar in terms of the way that he fights to, say, Tim Sylvia, who got knocked out by Ray Mercer in an MMA fight back then, because he went in there thinking, I can't say what he was going to think, but he struck in the very early going with the guy and got hit with a big punch. And just because you have kicks and you have kicks and knees and other assets in the stand up doesn't mean that you can't still be caught with a big shot from a boxer if you're just looking to stand with them.
Right, and I think that goes back to what we saw in the Randy Couture-James Toney fight, was that Couture assessed the risk, decided it wasn't worth it, even if he could beat him in the stand-up, and shot at the very first opportunity to get him down as fast as he could.
Absolutely.
So does this add anything to Floyd being considered the greatest of all time? Does it change, or was he that already?
Does it change anything? No. No, I don't think a lot of people are going to be putting this particularly high on the resume of Floyd Mayweather when you talk about the all-time boxing greats. Is he the best boxer ever? I don't feel like I'm qualified to say. I'm not really a boxing historian. I follow the sport pretty closely, and I think he's likely the best of his era. But how does he compare to Sugar Ray Robinson or Sugar Ray Leonard or Marvin Hagler or anyone like that? I mean, I don't like those sort of cross comparisons in sports in general, but certainly not one like boxing where I haven't gone through and watched a lot of sort of old tape of fighters from different eras.
Right. Your Muhammad Ali's, your George Foremans too. You've also got to consider guys like that in the equation. And yeah, I know that people will at least say that he's perhaps the biggest money draw ever. I think even adjusted for inflation, it would be hard to argue that anybody's made more money than Money Mayweather.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only real competition, because the game's just changed. It's so much easier to make massive amounts of money now than it was in, the 1950s, 60s, 70s when you're sort of traveling around, or for that matter in the 80s when pay-per-view is still in its infancy. I mean, I think the only one who really has an argument compared to Mayweather is Tyson, and I don't think Tyson wins that argument.
No, I don't either. But Peter, what's your assessment now, having seen the fight, knowing that this is probably the final fight of Floyd Mayweather's career? What do you think?